Welcome back, Guardians. So there's a huge question that I've been asking myself since I heard anything about Armor 2.0 and the stats from D1 coming back into D2, and that was, how do I know when to start infusing? Because if I get one piece that has great recovery and great mobility, but it only has intellect or strength, how do I know that I'm not going to get another piece that has great mobility and great recovery, but has great discipline and great intellect? And then how do I know that when I get another piece of mobility and recovery, that it has great discipline and strength with a little bit of intellect? So there's patterns that I wanted to figure out. So I know that I have a great piece to start dumping my materials into to kind of make sense in the game, basically. It didn't matter if you're playing Destiny 1 or Destiny 2, there's always a pattern in how the stats and armor rolled out. Some classes, such as a Titan, never got the same stats as a class of a Warlock. Warlocks would get more mobility recovery in their builds and recharge rates, but a Titan might have very little mobility, greater resilience with a little bit of recovery, and then the same thing for the Hunter. High mobility, high recovery, with a little bit of resilience involved. So I wanted to point out those patterns. I also want to mention that this could be completely false. There might be changes from now until Shadowkeep, but since Shadowkeep is right around the corner, I think it's safe to assume that what we saw in the Armor 2.0 preview is probably exactly how it will be in the game. So let's get started. If you watched the preview on Wednesday, they talked about getting the SOLSTICE 2.0 armor. So what will happen basically is you go see Banshee on day 1, he'll give you your brand new clean slate armor to start building back up. Anything that you're putting together right now in the SOLSTICE or the EAZ is not going to be able to be used. So don't waste your time trying to farm out the perfect god roll set of SOLSTICE gear, because all that's going to be trash on day 1. Everything is going to be light capped up to 750. All your old mods and things like that are not going to be able to be used in Armor 2.0. It's just basically going to be trash, so no point in wasting your time putting that gear together. However, Luke did tweet saying they're going to include general mods, such as small arms loader and things like that, you can go ahead and start playing with right away that won't cost you any elemental points or be attached to that affinity. Now let's get into the stats on the armor that they picked up. The starting pair that they had that was actually higher light versus the new SOLSTICE one that he picks up at the Postmaster, and we'll compare the stats to see if there's any type patterns that we can notice to kind of follow to know when we have a good piece of gear or not. So he goes to the helmet. You'll notice the helmet is a higher resilience helmet with more recovery than mobility, which is non-existent on that piece of gear. So I'm curious, does every recovery and resilience piece like that, where resilience is dominant, always have a higher dominant strength than it does for discipline and intellect? Are all of those always going to be the same if they roll like that? But it may be off by 1 or 2 points in each of those little categories, but the dominant ones are always there. Now let's look at his other helmet and see what kind of combination we have with this one. So this helmet has a stat version where it's mobility recovery dominant with resilience being the lowest. Does that mean every time that there's a mobility recovery dominant helmet like that, does it always mean that intellect is always going to be the dominant bottom trait with an equal amount of the discipline and strength stats? Let's keep moving on. It'll start making more sense the further we keep going. Now let's take a look at the arm piece. So does that mean that every arm piece that has high resilience with a very minimal amount of mobility and no recovery, does that mean that every arm piece that has those top 3 like that mean that it's going to be like that for those bottom 3? So I want to keep making this kind of broken down so it makes more sense once we get to it. Now we're looking at the chest piece. It's a high resilience chest piece. Does that mean every time there's a high resilience chest piece with that much, around that much recovery, those are the points you're going to be looking for that you want higher? Does that mean it's always going to roll where intellect is dominant on that one? The stats will always maybe look the same, but there's be point differences by 1 or 2 smaller or lower, so you're always trying to grind out those little tiny pinches higher, but always of that same stat type gear that looks like that. Every time it's a high mobility, high recovery, does the strength always be the dominant one? You know what I mean? So this is what I'm trying to kind of get at. Now let's go to the SOLSTICE armor all put on versus the other Guardians. Alright, so pay attention the most on this part because it gets kind of confusing, but if we're understanding this correctly, it's a huge head start when Shadowkeep launches. So let's get started with the helmet first on the Titan. We'll notice it's more mobility recovery than resilience. They're around the same stat, and then it means that the intellect will be more than the discipline and the strength. We want to assume that because we're looking for those patterns in armor to know that if we're ever getting a high mobility recovery Titan helmet, that it always means more intellect. There's only so many combinations the game is going to be able to handle. It's not going to be dozens or hundreds or even thousands or nothing like that. It's only going to be so many combinations, the same as it is in the game currently with the combination of stats you can get on Warlocks, Titans, and Hunters. So if we know that the mobility and recovery being where they're at equals more intellect when it comes to helmets, I'm not saying it's going to be like that for every piece of gear, but when it comes to helmets, if we can find patterns in that, we know that we have the best possible version if we like those stats, and the only thing we need to fine tune is looking out for another helmet that has maybe a tiny bit more intellect, such as like 2 more points, or maybe a little bit more recovery, but as long as the dominance is like that on the top 3, we know that the dominance is going to be like that on the bottom 3 as well, if that makes sense. We'll have to scope out some more gear as more previews are being shown, but if we can figure this out before Shadowkeep even launches, then we have a huge head start by already knowing the patterns and how the stats can roll out. Let's take a look at the helmet on the Warlock to see if it copies the same stats, and you can see that it does. It has that mobility and recovery as its dominance, and the exact same stat on the Titan helmet where intellect was higher than the discipline and strength, but the discipline and strength equaled the same. And you can see again, the same thing on the Hunter helmet as well. It's a totally different element, such as the Warlock and the Titan helmet as well, but it's the same stats. High mobility, high recovery equals that high intellect when it comes to helmets. Now let's look at the chest piece, because I think this is where they're differentiating the Guardians. Keep in mind this is an exotic chest piece, so it could be different from a legendary chest piece, but you'll notice that the resilience is higher, and the mobility is in 2nd place, and the recovery is in 3rd place. The stats on it are high intellect, really low strength, and about medium on the discipline for its start out stats. Now let's take a look at the Hunter chest piece, look at its top 3 stats, compare them to the bottom 3. This is what I mean about differentiating itself from other classes. You'll notice it's the same 3 stats set up for the top, but on this one, it's high strength, 2nd place for intellect, and then a little bit of discipline. Same top 3 is that exotic chest piece, so it could be that exotics are different, or the elemental could be different, but I think it's just the chest piece that'll have different stat options per class Guardian. And then we go over to the Warlock. It has a different one from the Hunter and the Titan, and it's more focused on the mobility, the recovery, and then for its bottom 3, it's high intellect, discipline with a little bit of strength. Nothing else to compare that one to, but if we go to the legs of the Titan, you can notice the stats: high mobility, high recovery, more strength than anything, and then intellect being in 3rd place, the smallest. Now let's go over to a Warlock, and you can see the same exact combo, except this one's masterwork, so it's 2 points higher on each meter. When you fully masterwork it, it gives you those 2 extra ones, but the same combo is the same for the bottom as well. Exact same stats as the Titan one, except this one's masterworked. And then if we go to the Hunter, we'll see the exact same combo. It's masterworked like the Warlock, but that mobility recovery matches, and it's the same thing for the strength on the bottom. Let's go over the Titan arms, and then see if the other classes have matching stats, to see if there is a pattern with those. So it looks like mobility is the dominant stat here, and then we have the bottom stats being high discipline, high strength, with the 3rd place being the low intellect. Now let's go over to the Hunter arms, and we'll notice they're exactly the same, where it has the mobility dominance and then equally matching high discipline, high strength arms. So if you like that stat roll, you know that there's probably no other version like that that's going to come with high intellect instead of high discipline that has the mobility, the resilience, and the recovery like they're at, so you can know what to farm and what to wait for, or know if something exists at all. But like I said, there could be 3 different options where it shows the same mobility, recovery, and resilience, but it might be high intellect, high strength with a very little bit of the discipline sitting there. We just don't know yet, but from what it is looking like, it seems like when the top 3 are like they are, the bottom 3 are also going to have their stapled combination as well. So that's why all those leg pieces and arm pieces and helmet pieces were matching the stats, but the chest pieces were different, because I think that's probably how they're going to differentiate, because we saw the Hunter and the Titan with the same top 3 stats, but the bottom 3 weren't the same, and that could have been either the class that they were, the fact that one was an exotic and one wasn't, or combinations like that. Basically, I don't know 100%. Like I said, I'm just speculating, because I do know there's only going to be so many combinations, and once I can figure those out, I know to stop looking, and that's the best that it's going to get. The only thing I can alter at that point is trying to find one with those little few points higher to grind out to make sure it's the top roll that I need to get for my tiers to be unlocked, basically. But anyways, I just wanted to give everybody a heads up so you can start looking out for those patterns yourself if you're ever watching any of the previews before Shadowkeep actually launches, because if you can start picking those out, you'll know what exists and what doesn't exist way ahead of time and start kind of putting your build together in your head or whatever. One more thing I want to do is give LifetimeControllers.com a huge shout out. Lifetime Controllers means one control is a lifetime of gaming. I've used them for a long time, and I've never had controller problems since then, basically. What it is you buy the control, you register on the website. Anytime it breaks or goes out or anything that happens, it's just not functioning like a normal controller, you contact them, they mail you another one, you put the old one back in the box, and you ship it back. It's the greatest company. I never have to gripe and let my friends hear about me griping about me not being able to run anymore because my dude keeps cutting off. It's just a sure, simple process, and I recommend them to everybody because I believe that great companies like that deserve a lot more attention to grow out there and help other gamers like me out. I wear out controls a lot because I just use the stock PS4 control, but they do custom shells and also competitive controls. But I'm just letting you know, if you ever need any kind of control support, they are the dudes to go to. If you Guardians ever want to show any kind of support or appreciation, you can do paypal.me/Ristophilis or teespring.com/Ristophilis. Help me with gear support so I can make better, higher quality videos and grow this beast community to the fullest. Join the fam, click that join button, become part of our beast squad. Again, my name is Ristophilis. I will keep y'all all informed, up to date, before Shadowkeep launches. Y'all take it easy, Guardians. It's been my pleasure, and I'll see you next time.
In space.